Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. Hey, can you believe that we are in the midst of season 10? Man, this is exciting, and they thought it wouldn't last. It's amazing that for the past 9 seasons, we've been having great conversations, wonderful guests, tremendous insight, listener participation, and the fun and the love continue. And so I love bringing these interesting conversations to you. This is a place where you won't have conversations like this, interaction like the ones that we've been having, that we're going to have. And so today is no different. I have a very special guest who's a dear friend. We've known each other for almost 3 decades. His name is Marquis Hunt. Yes, and he hails from Little Rock, Arkansas. Mr. Hunt is a spiritual director and interfaith leader, professional musician, and he's the author of The New Human, When People We Love the People We Love. As I mentioned, he's from Arkansas. It's where he grew up. And he's also the founder and the developer of Flow, a community-based practice that integrates music, philosophy, and strategic discourse. Marquis has worked in national and international levels, helping thousands of individuals reach higher levels of human potential. I love this, Marquis, that your philosophy is the economy of being. It underscores his life's work and dedication to giving, positioning him as a philanthropic force, unlike many who are tied to traditional career paths. Mr. Hunt, welcome to Black Like Me podcast.
Man, thank you. I am elated to be here. It's good to be with you, Dr. G.
Oh man, this is fantastic. And listen, we go back decades. I mean, I knew you before my daughter was born. Lexi's almost 28 because, she had 115 day stay in the hospital, and you actually came up to the neonatal intensive care unit to visit her. So we go back a long ways, man.
We do, man. It makes me feel a lot younger sometimes.
Good. Hey, man, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said it that way. And so, hey, listen to for our listeners, we're glad that you're here. We are working on new software because most of my interviews are in person. They're face to face, but because interesting voices, my contacts with people with interesting voices are all over the country and all over the world. We're trying software that allows us to have virtual guests or guests in my virtual studio. And so if you hear some things that we're tweaking, it's because we're trying to make sure that we can continue to bring tremendous programming to you. So listen, Mr. Hunt, because you've listened to the podcast, that I like to open up with black icebreakers.
I know.
So might I ask you a few of them, sir?
Absolutely. I was waiting for them.
Okay. Hey, grits or cream of wheat, young man?
Grits.
Okay, you know the spiel. How do you eat them? Let's just get right to the chase. Are they sugary? Are they salty? You're also a foodie, so I might give you a little grace. How do you take your morning grits?
Oh that's a great question. I'm glad we got that distillation happening. Listen, there's only one way to eat grits, and that's with some sugar and some butter.
Come on.
That's the only way to do it.
Hallelujah. Come on.
Everybody else.
Otherwise, you might as Yes. Otherwise, you might as well just go eat, cream of wheat or Captain Crunch or something. You said there's only one way. I love that. I knew that you were an intellectual to eat them right. I knew you were an intellectual. Listen, do you put your scrambled eggs over in them when you make them? Do you put your eggs? Or do you keep your grits separate from everything?
No, there's no separation. There's no separation anxiety here. I will mix. I believe in mixing food.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Listen. We can just end right there.
And sauces too. Don't work
Oh
with
yeah,
me.
you break that, and listen, you can put a little toast over into it also, man.
Oh,
Sometimes when I ask my black icebreakers, I'm not sure which ones are generational, which ones are regional. So some of these may be hit or miss. But I heard this discussion from someone who's in an interracial relationship, and the gentleman who's white says, whenever my wife and I are out, we talk about something that we're going to take care after the evening is over. He is the white gentleman, says, I always say, when we get home. He says, but his black wife always says, okay, we can do that when we get back to the house. And so I'm curious, when you're describing your abode when you're out, do you refer to it as when I get home or when I get to the house?
you got me thinking here because I think I do a blend of both, but I usually say when we get back. When we get
Ah,
back, especially if I'm on vacation or something. Always when we get back, but usually, and it might depend on how many libations I've had, which will determine what I
aha.
say.
So for you, could go either way, house or home.
Yeah,
Here's another one. When you're describing, let's just say you're at home and you're not feeling well, and you're lying down, and someone says, "Hey, Marcus, what are you doing? What are you doing?" Do you say I'm in bed or do you say I'm in the bed?
I'm in
In
the
bed.
bed. In
No,
the bed.
I think that's a black thing because I've had one of my white friends say, "Why do you guys say in the bed instead of saying I'm at home in bed?" Like we, so okay, no,
Because
that's interesting.
they probably did. They didn't understand some of them that some of us didn't have a bed, so there was only one bed. So we were in the bed and not on the couch, and not on the pallet.
What's a pallet?
It's on the floor. So
That's
with
when
a
you put
blanket.
that's when you put cover on the floor. Mr. Hunt, can you swim?
I can't.
You can? Okay, I
I
got you.
can't.
Um, Let me ask you this: when you were young, did the older folks have did they have this term called fast? Like, would they would refer to certain young girls as she's fast?
Absolutely.
And
Except
what?
it wasn't a T on the end of it, but
It's just FASS.
it was a fast.
Like she's a fast girl. What did it mean when a girl was fast?
It meant that uh, she liked the boys a lot.
You try to and listen. This is not PG. She was particularly if she got pregnant
She,
while she was young or she dressed a particular way. Like look at that fast little
oh
girl.
yeah, that
And that
means
was that mean
she was
that was a
immodest.
bad.
Immodest. Yeah,
Yeah,
she
she
was.
was. She was. You using all these clean words. Let me see.
She, but
Now what?
well, I could say she means she didn't have a pussy rag on at church. That's what that means. Pussy. You know, I mean, I can go there if you want to go. When when they had on the
Oh,
short
oh,
skirts and they
oh.
couldn't sit on the front row, and, and they had to get a handkerchief. They had to get a handkerchief and put over their
Whew,
knees.
whew. Okay, okay. I know the FCC doesn't regulate podcasts, but I think they're going to start. Oh man, you got me crying up here in Wisconsin, man. Hey, speaking of fast girls, when you were growing up, would older people, when they saw maybe a young girl playing, I don't know why they had all of these about girls, but a young girl outside playing, and she had a little kid on her hip, they would say, "Get that baby off your hip." Do you remember hearing older people saying that? Is that just a upper Midwest kind of thing?
I
Where when
think
girls were outside playing, they would just say, "Look, girl, put that baby down. Get that baby off your hip."
it's an upper Midwest thing. Down in the South it was hot. Wasn't nobody trying to carry no baby on their hip down here. It's just gonna make it's gonna make them hotter.
Man, so listen, while we still on the whole church thing, when you were a kid, were you ever instructed to hold up your index finger when you had to walk in church? Let's say you're sitting in church, you're a musician, so you probably were sitting like in the band, but if you had to get up and go to the bathroom, do you remember seeing people hold up their index finger whenever they walked in church or moved in church, particularly while the preacher was talking?
100%. Absolutely.
Oh, so that's something that my white listeners probably don't even relate to if they went to church. What did that index finger mean when you held it up and you walked? So it's like imagine yourself holding your arm at a 45-degree angle, no 90-degree angle, And you're holding your finger up almost like you're at an auction. What did that finger mean, Mr. Hunt?
It means I need to be excused. I'm asking to be excused. I need 1 minute. And so, the black
I need
church,
1 minute.
we was in church so long that we had to ask permission to leave to go to the restroom. In white churches, they didn't have church long enough to do that. They could just use the bathroom in front. They, they didn't have to get up and leave 2 hours into the service. That was
Whew. Marcus, man, you making me laugh. You making me listen. Did, when you growing up, did you know what a washcloth was?
yeah.
I
Of
mean,
course, I'm
you
sorry.
said
Of course.
you had such an incredulous look on your face, but you know that there's this discussion like, is that a black thing? Do black people use washcloth? So what is a washcloth for?
It's
And is it different from a face towel?
it's the same thing as a face towel, man. That's what I use, the face towel or washcloth. I called it a face towel when I was a kid. I think since I've I don't know, gotten older, I'll say washcloth. But when I was a kid, we called it a face towel. But I knew what it was. I was code switching when I was really young, man. I had to.
You were okay. I got you. Oh yeah, that's right. You had to do that. Listen, are you familiar with this phrase? Can you finish this? I ain't got to do nothing but stay black in.
Die.
Now that's a saying that only we utilize. I've never heard one of my white friends, Asian friends, Latino friends say, I ain't gotta do nothing but stay Asian and die. But black people, they said, listen, Marquis, listen, go put this plate on the table. You have to do it. You got to do it. You be like, I ain't gotta do nothing but but stay black and die. Those were two sure things in life.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's funny because we can't modulate to anything other than black in this current age with so many people. We gotta stay black.
Man, I'm telling you, no, it's so interesting, and Marcus, you listen to the show enough to know that I love the strength and the beauty of culture, and how you grew up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, but yet we were both hearing phrases about I ain't got to do nothing but stay black and die, or playing the dozens, or telling your mama jokes to kind of get through hard times. Or calling a washcloth a face towel. That's what we called it too, a face towel. There's a face towel, hand towel. But I love seeing the power of how that worked without social media, how we communicated those same kinds of things to people, what we did during storms, or why we had plastic on the furniture, or whether or not we ate collard greens with our thumb, index finger, middle finger, cornbread. By the way, you ever eat collard green? You ever eat greens with your three fingers?
No, but it's because I didn't grow up
Did you?
right.
Were you?
I I didn't grow up right. I didn't grow up liking green. So I had to. So I didn't learn that skill, but it is common where I come from, which is
Is it really?
actually
So you had
Dumas.
siblings?
Oh, I
Oh,
had
that's
eight. There
right,
was
Dumas. That's
Yeah, that's eight of. There was nine of us, man. I was the ninth child, so all the greens was gone by the time they got.
man, I love it. Marquis, I I I've got to have you back on the show sometime just to talk um, solely about your book. But in this conversation, for the sake of this conversation, I wanted to connect with you because you shared an article that you wrote entitled "Black Brother," and it touched me in a real unique way. The opening of it says that in a world that's constantly trying to silence us, being black men, it's easy to feel like your voice doesn't matter, like your story is already written. But what if the narrative that they've been feeding us isn't the truth? What if your power is far greater than you've been led to believe? This piece is a call to every black man who's ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or trapped in a system that wasn't built for us. It's time to reclaim our story, to stand together, and to recognize the strength that lies within. Take a moment, brother. This is for you. And then you begin talking about the misinformation, the lack of motivation that black men have regarding the power of their vote. And in this season, on the heels of both the RNC and the DNC, There's a sense of hope. There's a sense of apathy. There's a sense of fear. You're penning something as a black man to black men about the context of how we have been seen, held, and experienced historically, and how that's connected with our misunderstanding of the value of our vote. What else besides that motivated you to pen such a powerful letter? And we are going to put a link to it in my podcast notes, so all of our readers, all of our listeners will be able to read it. Why'd you pen this?
Several reasons. Most immediately, as a band, having a band and a recording artist, and most of my musicians are black men, and they range from the early 20s to mid 40s, and then I have colleagues who are black men who are dying at 49 and 50, working hard, gigging, and then they're fighting each other. And then every now and then we have this conversation about politics. I'm a political junkie, so to speak. I'm really not a junkie,
Mm-hmm.
but in this season of life, I think the world opens up to new possibilities. But when I hear my black brothers talk, they say, oh man, that stuff don't matter. And I hear this more and more among people who are working close to me in my vocation.
Mm-hmm.
They're all ages. I talked to an 18-year-old young man who had just left college. He didn't want to do his scholarship. He was on football, and he got there and didn't want to do the work, and he didn't want to be out in the sun. So he came home. I said, what are you going to do? He said, man, I don't know. I'm going to go get a job. I said, you're 18. Are you going to vote? He said, man, no, I ain't voting. I don't need to vote. He said, nobody, they don't mean anything. They don't do anything for us. Voting? Man, I ain't going to waste my time with that. And so that hit me hard, because here's an 18-year-old, and that connects to
Mm-hmm.
The immediate generation above him. He's not had enough time to really have an informed decision, but there's some chatter happening in the background that has convinced him that in the operating system, he doesn't matter. He's irrelevant. And they're saying so many other things that just floor me. And this is ancillary to this. About last year this time, I was in the grocery store. There was a black man checking me out, young black man.
Mm-hmm.
And I had on a Banana Republic t-shirt, from the store Banana Republic.
Sure.
He said, oh, is that a real government? Is that where you're from? And I was like,
What?
well, that was the expression I had from my mouth and on my face. And I realized that he had heard some chatter about Banana Republic, but he was not in a community framework that allowed him to really understand the actual denotation and connotation of what these things were. And I'm like, we have to do something. And I begin to get sadder and sadder, because we are affected by being absent in the system. They know we're absent in the system, and they depend on us being absent in the system. And we've bought into this structural irrelevance. And it's a part of our skin almost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you were 18, 19, 20, and you were able to vote for the first time, did you see it as a great opportunity? I mean, I got my driver's license on my 16th birthday. I voted as soon as I could upon turning 18. What was your attitude about voting when you were 18?
I was really excited about voting, and so I turned 18, blah, 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 back then. But which I missed was, I turned 18 in 86. I was trying to get away from saying that. And I
Sure.
remember being excited, but in 88 is when Jesse Jackson was running for president.
Sure.
And you want to talk about somebody who was excited? Oh my God. I was playing saxophone for political rallies. I met Kitty Dukakis. I was like right there trying my best to get in and be a part of these conversations, be a part of the energy. I loved it. And fortunately for me, my father in Dumas he was a minister, a very prominent minister there. And I saw at the time our United States senators would come to our home, Senator Pryor, Senator Bumpers. At the time, Governor Clinton came through. My father was there. They came to us. They came to him. And so I was close to these people. And I had perhaps a different experience than the average black boy my age,
Hmm.
because I was in that conversation, at least in the proximity of it.
There, I was in a conversation recently, with some good brothers of mine, and one said his son is 18, and the subject of the election came up, and his son, a black male, said he's voting for Trump, and he said my jaw dropped. I was trying not to show what I thought about what he was saying and why. And they're saying things like, Trump's a felon. He might go to prison. Trump is hard. Like, there's some sick kind of connection that somehow, because he's got legal cases, he can relate to these folks, or he seems more in touch. His world coincides with theirs a little bit more meaningfully. But as we were talking, we were just surprised that there's a woman who's running for president, who's got qualifications, who looks like their mothers, their grandmothers, their sisters, but yet there's this attraction to Trump. Have you heard about that phenomenon with young? I'm sure this is true for people for groups in younger black groups in general, but particularly black men. Have you heard about this?
I've not heard that particular thing in my proximity, but I have heard the chatter of it and the conversation. I actually wrote an article about that, that talked about, I called it Trump's repugnance, the nerve of him to believe that him being a convicted felon gave him some type of agency or an identifying marker with blackness, which is to suggest that our identity is connected to criminal behavior.
Right. Exactly.
In the article, it was edited out before the article was published, but I said, fuck him. I mean, the nerve of you to build on this trope and then to reaffirm for many people that this is who we are. I understand this, I don't talk about this much, but I have a son that's incarcerated. And there was so much about his life where he was very inclined to want to ascend into whiteness, to find a type of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And being a black man, it was very difficult for me to fight against that narrative because I didn't look like the picture of white success at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it made my voice and my instructions a lot less credible. And then to see him in that system, it pains me. I have another son who is troubled with even believing his vote matters. And he's angry to some degree with the system. And so part of what spawned this idea in me to write this article
mm-hmm.
is because I didn't want to preach to them, but I wanted to let them know that I feel this and I see this, and it's close to me. This is really close to me because my children immediately are affected, but not just mine. And so I see them identifying with Trump. I had a guy just close to me actually said to me he didn't vote. He didn't want to vote in the last election. He didn't want to vote for Trump or Biden, so he wrote in Kanye West. And I said,
wow.
Why? He said, I didn't like either one of them. He said, but honestly, I felt better under Trump because I made more money. And I was with my colleague, Bruce James, who was with me on the flow, and he said
mm-hmm.
immediately, and Bruce is an economist, he said, but are you factoring in all the lives that died? All of the people in your family, your extended family, your friends who died. And it was that there was this disconnect that our worth is really only connected to our ability to acquire money or some type of intrinsic power. And so this is why I wanted to write, because I was hearing these conversations more often than I thought I would ever hear them in the space of like 3 months.
Wow. There's a paragraph here where you say in your letter, you are valuable, your life is valid, your voice matters, and your vote, it can move mountains. Those who spent so long trying to convince you otherwise are doing it because they know the truth. They know that your agency, if you ever really discover it, would overwhelm the lies they've built their power on. But tap into that power. You have to start by believing in your own worth. You have to look past their lies and see yourself for who you truly are. That's a powerful message to write to young black men within the context of explaining the political power of their personal agency and how they need to use it for good.
I've lived that. I still live that. I mean, as an artist and a creative, I understand because I write music that doesn't exist in the earth until I bring it here.
Right.
I write poems and poetry that doesn't exist in the earth until I bring it here. And those of us who are men of vision, even like yourself, there are things we
Uh-huh.
see that it takes time to develop and to incubate. And so, and you mentioned in the introduction, the philosophy of the economy of being, that the first step in the economy of being says, look within.
Mm-hmm.
And it means that I'm going to look within myself and find what is in me that is limitless. Because in order for a person to operate from a wealthy place, they have to be willing to give without the fear of being diminished. And all of us have something in our inalienable power, in this God given essence in our divinity that is unthreatened. And I've tried to show Black men we have been more agreed to fight each other than we have been agreed to build each other. And we are tearing ourselves apart, and the culture, the dominant culture, depends on this fallacy of self awareness, or what I call in the article a brilliant lie. It depends
Mm-hmm.
on our ability to misunderstand that we can move a mountain with just a little. We can, I say in the article, if you got $6 and your friend has 6 cents, you got enough to bring them up to power. They can be more powerful than they were. And
Right.
I could
Right.
go on and on and on, but power and resource, I'm a firm believer that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We can bring all our little bit together with some insight and with wisdom and with elders and people who are wise. We can turn that little into much. We can use our own economy. And not voting is a type of economic downward spiraling.
Mm-hmm.
It is saying, I don't matter. I won't choose. I will walk away. I will actively walk away.
Mm.
And we're not walking toward anything.
You know, I asked the question of my colleagues yesterday as we were talking about this phenomenon of young Black men being drawn to Trump, and I said, what role does misogyny play in this? Um, you know, we don't always agree with people just because they look like us or they share our ethnicity, but we know that there are things that we hold in common, and the likelihood that someone like Kamala Harris can understand my plight, my life, my dreams, my pressures, um, my fate, my potential is way greater than that of Donald Trump. So it's not just just the melanin in her skin, but we wanted to vote for people we relate to, who we think can understand us, who get us, and who we think in getting us will help to make life better. So that's why everyone or most people vote, because not just that they look exactly like the presidential candidate, but that they believe that they will speak to their life stages and that they understand them. Have you thought about the role that misogyny plays in Black men not being inclined to vote for a Black female presidential candidate?
I have. And I think writ large, Black men are not interested in being led by a woman. And in where I live, it's still common to hear a Black man, 40 years and younger, refer to women as a female. And so you got a
Mm-hmm.
female, I got a female. It's as though
Right.
the woman is an animal or something removed or inferior. So and we
Subhuman somehow.
yeah, and so we have bought into the idea that women are the weaker vessel on some level, but the pathology there is we are still practicing this drive to dominate something. And
Mm-hmm.
so misogyny is a way through which the Black man can find something to overpower. They can do it with a woman, or they can do it with a dog. Because we treat Black men traditionally have treated their dogs differently. The dog is essentially like the slave. It's the one that they could bully. They put them on a chain. They fight them. But there's something else happening with Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Trump is seen as a person who is getting away with being derelict. He's getting away with saying what he wants to say, and he's doing
Right,
it
right.
with impunity. And there's something attractive. There's I want to say it's a fantasy. I won't even call it an aspiration, although I think it's trying to operate like an aspiration.
Right.
This desire to say what you want to say and do what you want to do without consequence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because we find that the only way we understand liberation is through the lens of being the oppressor in the context of oppression. And we've bought into that narrative. We haven't bought into a liberation framework. We've bought into an oppression framework. And so misogyny is the only way to successfully live through that framework, especially in a relationship with a woman. And we don't want no woman telling us what to do, and we would deny her success.
That's some messed up stuff. That's some jacked up stuff that we got to unpack and that we've got to process also to move through this. Hey, good people. You're hearing this message from me because you're enjoying a Black Like Me podcast episode. And like so many people throughout the U.S. and around the world, you're perhaps enjoying and benefiting from these honest conversations between everyday extraordinary Black people and how they navigate our world. It actually takes a lot of work and creativity to produce an amazing podcast episode for your personal and professional enrichment and enjoyment. But you can help lighten the load by pausing for a moment and considering the benefit of this podcast to you, and then clicking on the Patreon link in the show notes to become a supporter of the podcast. Listeners make this show enjoyable, but it's supporters that make it possible. For as little as $2 a month, you can help make this award-winning podcast even better. So take a moment and think about what this podcast means to you, how you respect it and how you look forward to it and how it gives you great insights. Click that link and support at a level that's commensurate with your benefit. Contrary to popular belief, podcasts are far from free and their impact is far more than merely nominal. So I invite you to take a moment, join with me in making this podcast even more powerful, even more polished, and even more popular. We want to take these conversations around the world, and you can be a part of that. Click the links now. What's your vision for your piece, for your article? Where do you see it going? How do you want it to get into the hands of Black men and those who love them so that we can get it into their hands? And how do we help you?
Well, this podcast is tremendous. And I mean, Black Like Me, I can't imagine how far reaching it will go. It's already been the most, the blog or the article I've written that's had the most traffic to my website. Mm-hmm, but what I did, I have a group of friends all over the country, particularly over the country, and I sent out private messages to them. I wanted to make this really personal. I started writing this article with statistics, like how many Black men vote or don't vote in Arkansas. What are the voting statistics in terms of what's the voter turnout? How many Black people are there in the state? And if we all showed up, would it make a difference? And then I was like, it's going to sound like I'm preaching if I do that. That's not where I want to go. And so
right.
I said, and then I had a thought. I was going to send out like a personal note to all my musician friends, just like tag them on a Facebook post and say, just read this. And I began to wonder, will they read? And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do a private message to most people. I'll put this on my Facebook wall. And I think if I can get people who care about Black men to read this, then I think they can get it to their brothers, they can get it to their uncles, they can get it to their sons and their cousins, and they can get it to anybody they know. I just wanted them to pick up the mantle and say, let's do something. And if this helps, let's give them this. If you don't know what to say, give them this. It's a start.
Sure. You know, Marcus, we had a live event recently, and Laleda was one of my guests. And she said, we often hear people saying, we've got to get Black people out to vote. We got to get Black people out to vote. But her response was, we've got to get more Black people on the ballot so that we're not just asking black people to vote, but we're asking black people to run for office, to shape policy, to become the kinds of political leaders we need. And we're not just good for votes, we're good for leadership as well. But if we have young black men who don't see the power of their vote, they're certainly not dreaming about how the power of someone else's vote could put them in a position where they could change hundreds of thousands of lives. And so if this isn't addressed properly, we will have also lost a generation of black men and black influencers who will never aspire to political office.
Right. One gentleman said to me, he said, in the context of Biden and Trump, he said, Biden is just as racist as Trump. And he said this with no information to really, there was no interest. You didn't feel any inclination that he was going to try to back up what he was saying. It was kind of like a talking point. It's like,
Sure.
I've heard this. This is a part of my implicit bias, and I'm going to say this. And I asked him why, and then I wanted to challenge the idea. And then he went on to say, and then another gentleman went on to say, it's just going to be a white man in the office of presidency anyway. And I said, well, there's a black woman running, and this is the 18-year-old. He said, man, she Asian. And
Interesting.
He said it with such resolve, such confidence. It was as though, how would I even question the notion? He could have just as easily said, man, the sun is made out of ice. Why are you talking to me about that? That's how adamant he was about the statement. So what I'm learning is that black men, particularly of a certain ilk, generation, or depending on what their lifestyle is, they don't really understand what racism is. They don't understand structural racism. They don't really even understand systemic racism. Racism to them is being called nigger, or that's an overt racism, but they don't understand the structural aspect of, let me tell them a story that's designed to make them believe a certain way about people who are actually trying to help them. Because it's much easier to believe a lie than it is to invest in understanding the truth. And here's another thing. I was talking to a black woman, and these conversations, Alex, have happened in the last 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman said to me, it was about Alex Jones. And she said, regarding Barack Obama, President Obama, she said, well, I just thought this was all fake, because I was like, yeah, of course he wants to go down there and make people not want to buy guns. I said, why would you think that? Well, why else would he go down there? And Alex Jones said it. I said, so what you're saying, she said, it was a long time. She said, I just realized that he was lying. I said, so you're telling me that Alex Jones could lie to you and you don't demand any proof that he prove it, but the person presenting you the truth must present you with evidence. She said,
footnotes.
Yeah. She said, yeah. I said, does that make sense to you? That you require the truth to prove itself, but the lie needs nothing but its words to co-sign itself. It's self-evident. And this is essentially where we are. We have been, I think, programmed and educated into a type of unwitting ignorance where the lie just feels more sexy. It gets to be more sexy. And just yesterday, I heard someone talk, it was with the new indictment, and I'm not trying to date where we are, but the new indictment, or the superseding indictment that came out about former President Trump. And in the punditry, the gentleman said, he said, what we know is if Trump wins, the cases go away. But if Kamala Harris wins, it's going to be still a fight. And my heart was broken that the truth seems so fucking feeble in the way we practice being in this world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We keep making demands of the truth that we don't make of the things that come to steal, kill, and destroy us.
Wow. Marcus, we're having this talk about young black men not voting. But I mean, do we have any idea? I'm just curious for your friends who are black males, your age group, what percentage do you think vote in local elections? We'll talk about presidential in just a moment, but just in regular school board, city council, et cetera, what percentage of your colleagues and where you live who are black men, what percentage do you think vote on small community elections?
Well, I can tell you right now, I'm already at 1 in 15, just if I call the people I've had conversations with in the last 2 months.
1 in 15 have voted at those small elections. So we can't really be shocked that these younger black men are not voting if
No.
if there's no civic lesson in the home. Like, I think in school they talked to us about the importance of voting, but my family encouraged me in finding out where I vote. I just got a picture of where I voted. I was in college. I lived at home, but after my classes, I voted at the South Madison Neighborhood Center. It's now the Boys and Girls Club. But I remember going in there in November, it's dark, voting, and how good that felt. But again, 1 in 15. And so we need to reach the younger generation because they have more seasons to vote. But what we have missed in our community, the Republicans, the Democrats, we have missed that black men probably are not voting in large numbers in small elections. Now, how about presidential elections? You said by your straw poll, it's about 1 in 15. Do you think it's much higher than that in presidential elections for your black peers in where you live in Arkansas for presidential elections?
No, the resolve is I'm not voting. I don't need to vote. It's irrelevant. And I think measurably one could argue that local elections can have more immediate effect on you.
You hear that again and again.
Yeah, but I don't. But they're less likely to vote in a presidential election. I would tell you this: many of them, especially where I come from, don't even know that an election is happening.
A national election?
A national election. They are so far removed from the loop, from this conversation having any relevance to their life. It is not a part of the TikTok algorithm. It is not a part of the IG algorithm. It is not a part of the Facebook algorithm. And these things, I think, are by design. They are creating and nurturing for themselves an infrastructure, a silo, if you would, where the information that's critical for their immediate success and extended success is being hidden or shielded from them. It's not happening in the conversations. When here where we are, we try to elevate conversations. I bring people over to my home weekly in an effort to elevate them in every aspect of their life. But the draw is to go into some type of mindless banter about either weed, marijuana, what the best strain of cannabis is, or who's shooting the best basketball, or who's kicking the best field goal or running the best touchdown. And maybe, those football players and those basketball players, they need this article. They need to put it out there if they can. I tried to write it in a way where, anybody could kind of get what I was saying, but they're not voting. They don't even know that they can vote, and they don't know when it is.
And where their local places are to vote, and when you register, we got some work to do. I mean, that a lot of my work is centered around the incarceration of black men and their return to the community and providing housing and coaching and support groups and employment training and placement. But in Wisconsin, if you are in prison or still on paper, so you're released, but you're still you're still incarcerated because you're either you're on an ankle bracelet or you're still on paper. So you're out, but you're still being watched, and you got to check in with your agent. You can't vote. It's when that ends, and so you have people inside who are a large percentage of the population, and they've lost the right to vote because they're incarcerated. And then upon release, many folks who are released in the state of Wisconsin are still what the community refers to as on paper or on probation. They're continuing their sentence, but on the outside, those folks cannot vote. And then we're growing a population of folks who don't think that it matters, that the Electoral College is taking care of this. There's just a real mental assault that's going on, and so on our folks, and that's why I liked your letter because it also puts the onus on us as well. It talks about systemically where this mindset has originated, but it stirs something in me that as a black male, a leader, a mentor, a pastor, a role model, an influencer, I need to share this with black men. I need to share this with my friends who have sons and nephews and grandsons who are thinking about these things, that the people or the systems that worked a game on their heads can't undo this. We've got to come in and rescue them. We've got to come in and say, hey, this matters. And the thing that I think I hear in your letter is that this isn't just an appeal to respond in November of this year, but it's waking black men up, getting their heads out their asses and realize, listen, if you don't think that your vote matters, then you don't think that your being a father matters, or your going to work matters, or your paying your bill matters, or your cleaning up your credit matters. Our action and lack of action has tremendous consequences. And if you don't understand that, you further marginalize yourselves in playing into this broader game. But right now, snatching people out of this into a sense of reality, I think is incumbent upon those of us who are black men and those of us who love black men.
Man, I couldn't agree with you more. These generations beyond us, the Gen Zers and millennials, in terms of the black life, many of them are far removed from the struggles of the civil rights era. And there's something that happened in this after we won what I would call a quasi victory in civil rights, is that we moved toward, almost ferociously toward, building a skill for consumption, where we were so happy to consume that we didn't understand how to save and how to build. And so one of the things, as a spiritual person, I'm trying to use voting essentially as a metaphor to get people to understand. Voting every 4 years is this symbolic, super sensational framework that invites you to understand the things you were just talking about, how powerful your choice is. We don't just vote in an election. We vote every time we make a decision.
Right.
Every decision we make is a vote. When we put our hands on someone, when we shoot someone, when we act violent to someone, that's a vote to say, I'm voting that if I'm trying to kill you, I'm voting that you are invalid. I'm voting about your incredulity and all those things, and your lack of importance and your lack of viability. And we are living out kind of a self-actualization that if I don't think I'm viable, and here's the thing, if I internalize that I'm not viable, the only way I can really see that through see my way out through a pathological matrix is if I find myself more viable than someone else. So it becomes necessary for me to make someone weaker rather than see my strength by making someone stronger.
Right.
And this is what I wrote this letter for. I was like, I need you to see that you have the ability to make someone stronger than they are.
Right.
If we can do that, if we can just incrementally use our vote, our choice, our will, our agency just to make someone stronger around us, which is, I thought the $6.06 framework was like, let's give you something you can touch. A lollipop, a popsicle, a hamburger, a French fry.
Right.
Be willing to share it. Say, well, it's all I got, but you can have some of it. We can eat it together. And this is what we're missing. It's like, I don't really care if my vote don't count. So I'm not even going to try to make it count. I'm not even going to try to moderate or modulate or increase or appreciate the little value I have. You might only have 5 stocks, but you can make it grow.
If you let it ride long enough.
Make it grow.
Yes. The other thing that I like about the letter, about the article, is that often when we talk about black men in America, particularly young black men, we talk about black men who are incarcerated, or maybe black men who aren't fathers to their children. I like the fact that you wrote to black men so that you didn't create a caricature in our imagination that this is a guy being released from prison on a Tuesday with nowhere to go, and he's been in the joint for 3 years. You made me think about the black men that are in the community, in my church, in my family, who may be working jobs, menial or professional, but they are so disconnected from the political and the economic and the socioeconomic realities, that they've just disconnected themselves from what could bridge them to greater success. So I appreciate your skill in doing that, because again, when we talk about young black men in their late teens, 20s, early 30s, we do get a caricature, and that wasn't shaped for me in reading your article. That it opened it up more broadly.
I appreciate you saying that, and I don't want to caricature black men because I have a son who's incarcerated. Now, the reason that means something to me is because I told him, I don't see you as an inmate. I see you as Zachary. I see you as my son. I said, but let me tell you something about humanity. I said, you can transform any space you're in. I said, if God is everywhere, I said, God can manifest itself everywhere and anywhere. And I told him something very basic. I said, if you can learn, everybody wants something. I said, if you can position yourself to help people have what they want and have what they need, I said, you can become a liberator where you are. You don't have to buy into this story because you were ensnared in a moment. Don't buy into this story. These people are real people. They're not less valuable than the people who are on Wall Street. These people they have as much potential as anybody that you may say are in the free world. I said, and somebody needs to be able to understand and transcend and see the potential of every living human. We still have those inalienable rights. I'm gonna get that word good one day.
You got it. You got it.
We have, nobody can take that from him. I'm like, I said, I will not confirm this version that is trying to be foisted on you. You have what's necessary to transform this moment. You have what's necessary to transform this room. People will try to stop you. They're going to try to pull you into a different version of who you are. But I put some stuff in you your whole life. You got this down deep in you. You can work a miracle. You can move this goddamn mountain.
This discussion is making me think about a few other things. Let's say this thing goes south. The energy that's happened with the nomination, the party nomination of Kamala Harris. Let's just say she loses by margin, and we understand that's young, disenfranchised black folks, not because they're in prison, not because they're on ankle bracelets, because they're disengaged and weren't really invited in. Then let's just say the Democratic National Party has got to wrestle with the fact that you're now losing by a margin of individuals you refuse to engage. Also, black men aren't where they are merely because of the Republican Party. Black men are where they are because of a structural reality that any party, irrespective of that affiliation, could have spoken to black men or say, hey, are they working in the party? Are they in the office? Are we hiring them? Where do we see them? Where's their growth? Where's the vision for them? And so as the old folks would say, how, I don't know, the chicks come home to roost, or the hen comes home to whoever comes home to
all right,
roost.
Jeremiah Jackson.
Yeah, it's very interesting that the deciding factors, the deciding vote, it lies within the very people who are some of the most disenfranchised, distrusting folks, and that makes their vote even more valuable. And its impact is immense, and its absence is immense, and that's just something very interesting for people to think about. I think that's why a lot of our white friends are saying, particularly if they don't like Trump, we got to get the black people out to vote, because they know that there's millions of us. We got to get the black people out to vote. And you can't further commoditize us by saying, oh, they get a vote. They get a ballot. They can go in the booth. You can't ignore people for 3 years and 8 months and then all of a sudden say, we need you in the damn booth. Please go vote. If nothing else, this is a haunting narrative of life, and not just political, but social reality in America, that if you refuse to pull people up to the table and help them to be at the table, those could be the very people, because of their lack of interest and engagement, can keep you from heading the table. And that's
That
ironic in my thinking.
that's exactly right. Man, I've always wanted to say that. That's exactly right. I hear that all the time on TV. That's
you,
exactly
ju-
right.
you just said it.
That's exactly right. And I the uh, the power in understanding the value of that voice. And I say in the article, there are people who understand what could happen. And let's be clear, there's a certain fear still resident in white America that would happen if Black people were able to really connect to this sacred identity that they have and then
Hmm.
begin to work collaboratively together. And so I think this vote that they come for is, in the concept of our company, G622, Group 622, is that's the ritual. The 4 year is the ritual. The 6 days and 22 hours outside of church, outside of
Hmm.
temple, outside of yoga, outside of the gym. Those are the moments when we actively practice being in this world. And so we have to, the Black man has to understand first, I have something to say that's never been said before. And there's a way not just to commodify it
Right.
or monetize it. There's a way. I don't need to monetize in order to actualize my power. We want to get into a framework where the money is chasing our essence more so than our essence is chasing the money. As
Right.
long as we are trying to acquire, we already have this capacity. I mean, your life is proof of this. Your life is everything you do, everything you build is not spawned from what you go acquire that allows you to do it. It's what you're
Hmm.
doing that draws to you and demands. The universe demands it. God demands it. And that's a power we have. We can show up in white America. The Democrats need to fully understand
Right.
that they could be leagues ahead if that's what they wanted. The Republicans, I think, understand this in reverse. They are actively silencing and suppressing and oppressing Black voices and Black minds. The
Because they
Democrats are the
understand its potential.
right, and the progressives are passive about uh, living in this kind of, well, they probably don't have the power they think they need, and they get lost in their white guilt, and then they try to do something that don't make sense, and they get lost in their fragility, and they try to do something else that doesn't make sense, and then Black people are trying to find just an ounce of power. That's I'm compelling. I'm trying to compel us
Hmm.
to let's let's be happy where we are with who we are first. And let's see how we can expand the joy, expand this love, expand this resource. And let's not be lamenting because of what I don't have. Let's work with what we do have. Because
Hmm.
if we
Hmm.
gonna get to what we ain't got, we ain't gonna be able to do it without what we do got.
Right.
I can't say that again because it was a Dumas way of speaking, but
We got to record it though. We have it on good faith.
yeah, we gotta do it with what we do got, and we have enough. We have enough. We have enough to turn the tide. We have enough to vote. And I told my friends, I said, this article particularly can have a certain type of life between now and November, but this piece is beyond this election. We
Exactly. I
can
could see that.
we yeah this is where we need to be, and I want my people, I want my brothers, my Black brothers, to understand how to be. If we try to be this much in charge, let's lead like masters, not masters with slaves, but
Sure.
masters of our own emotions, masters of our own bodies, masters of our own minds.
Our destiny. You know, you,
Yeah.
you wrap up your piece by saying, finally, I want to speak to the deep seated feeling that so many of us have, the idea that the government is against us, that we're nothing more than scapegoats in a system designed to protect white comfort. It's true. They've singled us out. They made us targets because they know that if they can keep us divided, keep us jaded, jailed, whether behind bars or in our minds, they can maintain and hold on to their power. And I'm paraphrasing this. But here's the truth, brother. You don't have to accept the story that they've written for us. We can write our own. We can reclaim our nobility, our identity, and agency, seeing ourselves as valuable, valid, powerful. And when we do, we can change the world. So I'm asking you to join me, brother, to stand with me, to believe in yourself the way I believe in you, because I see your potential. I see your strength. I see the power you hold. And I know deep down you see it too.
Deep down.
I love the way that in the midst of all of this, deep down, you're like, true, we've been written out. True, we are the scapegoats. But they've written a narrative, but it is not the final narrative. That pen is in our hand. That keyboard is on our laps. We get to now write a new narrative. And I'm so glad that you said it goes beyond November, because I'm tired of people seeing us only because they want our millions of votes, but then don't see that the same people that vote want jobs and promotions and loans and education for their children and health care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the push here is that we acknowledge that there's been a narrative that's written so that people don't misunderstand our plight and where we've been heretofore, how we've gotten to this point. But let's not make any mistakes. The ball is now in our court, and we get to write that final chapter. And will we keep repeating what they've written like it's on replay, or will we write something new and something different? And I think this piece could be used by a myriad of folks, particularly the thousands and thousands and thousands of my listeners who know, love, respect, work for, work with, live near, live next door to Black men who are aware of history and aware of realities, and sometimes it beats them down. This reminder that we can pick each other up is very important. And so one of my challenge to our listeners is if you know people, or the fact that you know people who could benefit from it, click this link, read it yourself, sit with it, read it again, and then forward it out 5, 10 people that you think would benefit from it. But also, don't just send this to your Black friends, Black Like Me podcast family. Send it to your white friends, because even though it's within our scope, our responsibility to rewrite the end of the story, we don't need our white friends making edits to the story, making additions and footnotes to the story. And so when you don't believe this is the case, you help to solidify this in the minds of Black people. And so take some action. Take some action. I was speaking with let me just pause for a moment. Does that make sense? Is that a good wrap up of what it is that we need our non-Black friends to read it and understand? People we know and love are walking around in this bubble, however professionally, whether our uniforms have our numbers on it, or we have state IDs, or we have badges, or we have collars and robes. There is nary a Black male that has lived in this country and escaped this scathing history. And we need people to understand that when they're not aware of it, when you're non-Black and not aware of it, and you don't do your role in understanding it for the sake and cause of Black men you do know and love, you have to perpetuate this. So everyone has responsibility, not necessarily for someone else, but for yourselves, because in securing your own mask or not, you position yourself or not in your ability to help someone else.
And I get to say it again. That's exactly right, Alex.
That's
exactly right.
Because we got to help people to reframe this stuff, Marcus, and to really think about it in a new way. We got to do this. I was speaking with a colleague, and we were talking about violence that's going on, police brutality and stuff for projects that I'm working on and that I'm thinking about. And he's a white gentleman, and he said, it's just really sad, because when we're afraid of people who are other, we hurt them. When we're afraid of other, we hurt them. And we got to get beyond that. I said, I want to push back in a friendly manner. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you're white and you're 8% of the world's population. So most of the world looks like me and Asian and Hispanic and not like you. And if we all held true to that view that we're going to hurt those who are other, y'all would be wiped out tonight. So
yes,
this issue is not really about we beat and brutalize people because they're different from us, because y'all are different from everybody. Y'all are different from 92% of the world, yet 92% of the world doesn't go out killing y'all just because you look different. So let's go deeper. The reason why police brutality exists with Sonia Massey and others is because people have believed that you could do those kinds of things and your pastor's not going to check you, and your daughter's soccer coach is not going to check you, and your neighbors are not going to scorn you or treat you with disdain, that you believe that you can do these things and walk away scot-free. And so everyone has got to take responsibility in the dismantling of this crap. And we can't just merely say it's because we're afraid of people who are different, or there's just this systemic reality out here that we can't control. That's like saying it's humid today. Nobody can control it. Humidity just happened. But systemic racism ain't humidity. It's not humidity. You don't just get up and atmospheric pressures and realities make this the case. People structured this stuff. And so people who are against it, who are aghast over it, must take responsibility in understanding it and dismantling it, and not just tisking it.
Man, again, that's exactly right. One of the things that's really I find interesting, and I say this because I grew up believing and hearing God is no respecter of persons.
Mm-hmm.
I translate that to mean power is no respect of persons. And the thing that Black people have to understand about power, about poverty and wealth, is that they operate on the same energy framework. They both operate on a faith framework, one that looks like fear, the other that looks like promise. But a person could use their power to oppress, or they could use their power to liberate. A person could use their power to steal, or they could use their power to redeem. And so we have to understand that this letter is not telling you that you don't have this power. It's telling you the direct opposite. Every time you move in an act of oppression, you are choosing to ignore or to use that same power structure in a way that undermines someone else's resource, someone else's wealth. What Black people have to do is realize we can't afford to participate in an economic framework that is aimed at making us determined to make people around us weaker so that we can look more like the people who have oppressed us. And so that power of oppression, your desire to talk about your brother or talk about your sister or talk about your whoever in your life has offended you, you don't have to call 20 friends to reduce the credibility of a person who is making moves in the world. We can lift our voices in ways that don't cost money. Even with this article, it don't cost any money to send a text message necessarily to say, hey, read this. And we can send it when we talk about a movie. Hey, did you go see the I can't even think of a movie, Beverly Hills Cop? Did you like it?
Right.
What's your favorite Eddie Murphy movie? Man, we could use that same 10 seconds and send out a conversation that can elevate us. And this is what we're not doing enough. That's incremental money and resource.
Sure. That's a true resource. Man, Mr. Hunt, I'm going to have to let you be on your way. As the old Black folks used to say, hey, I'm going to let you go. Well, I better let you go. But listen, folks, you can see some of the reasons why we've been friends for decades, because it's fun having people that you can laugh and play the dozens with, but also have intellectual, theological discourse, because it's also how in a biblical example, iron sharpens iron. It's how we help each other to be sharper and better, because we have these meaningful discussions that cause us to write articles or create music and art, or a podcast, or 37,000 square foot facility where art and culture and history will be celebrated and promoted and used as a tactic for wellness. Is because we spur each other on to greatness and significance. And so I want you to drink deeply from these waters, and in the challenge that's come from Mr. Hunt. Not only should you share the link, but share the link to this podcast, because the article and the podcast could be very powerful tools. If you're students, send them to your sociology professors, send them to your political science, send them to your business profs, send it to people who need to think more critically about these issues and ask, can we talk about this? Send it to your Sunday school teachers, to your faith leaders, to your friends, and to your families, because I don't want to create space where I bring these brilliant Black social and entrepreneurial thought leaders. I bring people together so that we can talk about our role in dismantling this systemic crap, and we want to encourage you to do the same. That's how we really become unified. It's not your Black Lives Matter sign in your yard. It's not telling me about how you dated somebody Black when you're in college or was in Cub Scouts with someone. It's really much different. And so take a moment and do something. Listen to this again, send it, write your thoughts about it, write a comment on the podcast, click the Patreon link and become a supporter. But we need people to work with us and to understand their potential, because, I might use this for my upcoming commercial though, Marquis. I want to do something to help white people to understand their place of power. In doing business in Black spaces and promoting Black leaders and supporting people economically and politically who are looking out for the good of all of us. And so just like we talked about the need to wake these Black men up from their lull, I want this podcast to wake up my white listeners from where they have been lulled asleep, and understanding that just listening to a dynamic podcast does not make you an ally. Getting up off your ass and doing something, saying something, tweeting something is not necessarily it either.
Right.
But have discussions, engage yourself, put yourself on the hook, so to speak. But support it, promote it, and share it, because that's how we begin to make a difference together. Mr. Hunt, I am so glad that you are here today. We've had a great discussion with you. I hope that it was helpful to you, but thank you so much for being my special guest today.
Man, the honor is all mine. The pleasure is mine. I'm grateful to be here. I think the first of many conversations. You are doing great work, and I appreciate you opening the door for this conversation worldwide.
It's meaningful. It's so meaningful. Hey, listen, I want to just introduce you to my great team, and I want to just do a shout out to them. Eli Steenlich, who's here in the studio with me today. He's in charge of social media, editing, and production. Jeremy Holliday, who's responsible for research, editing, and production. Don Thornton, who's in charge of guest invitations and production. Ariana Proctor, who's creating and moderating the listener space. We have space, and we're going to be talking about this letter in that space. There's a link for that as well. We are going to be continuing every episode with meaningful discussions. And Jakisha Hunt, who's responsible for our merchandise. And I'm Dr. Alex G., your podcast host. Thank you for being a part of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. Have a great day and continue to be a part of the change you want to see and that you want to live in.
Black like me. Black like me.
I want to thank you for taking time to listen to this episode of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. If you like that opening track of our theme song, you can show your appreciation to Corey Saffold, who created that and produced it, and Marcus Fleming, my cousin, who's on vocals. I also want to say that this podcast was started with the generous support of the Human Family Unity Foundation, and so we always want to stop and thank them for that. For the many patrons who support us through our Patreon page, thank you, thank you, thank you. You don't just listen, but you support, you lean in, and you help this podcast to be what it is. And then I need to thank you, the listeners, who make a point of downloading this, listening to it, and sharing it. Without all of you, this podcast would not be what it is and what it's becoming. Thank you so much.